Well, hey guys, welcome to Cheers. My name's Lee West, pastor of Cheers Church, and today we're in part 2 of our series on Earth's final days. We're going to be doing this for maybe 6 or 7, maybe even 8 weeks as we talk about the end times and what that means for the church and what that means for unbelievers as well. We're going to talk about how this plays out. Now, last week in part 1, we talked about that the earth does have a final day and a rebirth based in the book of Revelation and by God's plan and design. Well, today we're going to talk about as the final days take shape, there are some signs to be aware of. And I think that, when here in America, back in the day, when train tracks were being built into the western part of our nation, it was a sign that this infrastructure that's being built is a precursor to something else. And obviously we know that when train tracks were being built, a train was eventually going to be coming. So it wasn't necessarily that the sign was anything to be alarmed about in a sense, but it just gave us an idea that something was coming. And as we look at the signs today, we're going to be looking at the rise of authoritarian governments because that's how the end times begins to be played out. And we see that through the tribulation, how this overpowering kind of a one world, in a sense, government where many nations come together. And it's a very authoritarian government where the Antichrist is wanting to be worshiped. And if anyone does not worship him, then he is killed. And the buying and the selling has to be done by a mark that's taken on their hand or their forehead. And so it literally comes down to a very controlling government. Well, let's take a look at some of the signs here in regards to what is taking place and how this is going to actually come into being. So 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3, I'll bring this up on the screen here. It actually says here, let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. And this man of sin being revealed, it appears that this is the Antichrist that comes in to power, sets up his authoritarian government, and considered he's also the lawless one, and the beast as well is his name. And the purpose here is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4, and it says, who opposes himself and exalts himself above all that is called God and that is worshipped. And this is the Bible, Jesus, Christianity, even other religions, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself to be God. So he's literally setting up this government where he is showing himself to be God. He is going to be requiring people to worship him, and it's a total authoritarian type government. Another name for him is the beast as well. It's this Revelation 13 that says, verse 4 and 8, so they worship the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Now that's 3.5 years. And then he opened his mouth, blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And then here in Revelation chapter 13, verses 15 and 17, and calls as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So we are literally seeing this take place here. You can't buy or sell unless you've taken the mark. He wants everyone to worship him. This is just a a complete control situation. But here's the thing. It's not just going to be a light bulb that switches off and all of a sudden, we have an authoritarian world government. There is what I consider those signs that are the infrastructure of this government or this system being built, just like the railroad tracks coming across the land. The infrastructure's got to be built first before the train can actually come. And so is there things that are happening that is considered this infrastructure for this authoritarian controlling government that takes place in the end times? And I believe the answer is yes to that. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, I'll just read this, and it says, "And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. The lawless one of the beast will be destroyed by Jesus at his second coming," which I believe happens after the 7-year tribulation period. So a little quick recap here. Control, authority to make war with the Christians and overcome them. Control, authority over every tribe, over every tongue, every nation. That gives you a one ruler who is over this. The Antichrist or the beast is a one ruler who's over every tribe, tongue, and nation. So literally, that's a one world government with one leader over it, and other nations will come together to form that complete system. Again, control. People are forced to worship the leader and the image, the beast of the man of sin, or be killed. That's control. And then control. People are forced to take his mark, or will not be allowed to buy or sell. Again, control. So it's all about control, control, control. But before this authoritarian government can happen, the infrastructure of control needs to be built. So we've already seen videos. There are videos on YouTube. We've already heard newscasts reported that China is moving to this social credit system. It's in operation there in their country. The people love it because it supposedly reduces crime. The problem with that for us, especially in the Western world, is we want our freedoms. And this type of system in China does not allow for a lot of freedoms. They are under surveillance. It's a surveillance system, over 200 million cameras that are looking at with facial recognition. They can see who you are, how you walk. They can identify you at anywhere, at any point in their country. They can also identify your vehicle. And so this social credit system is all about scoring you based on your behavior. And if your behavior is good, meaning you're buying good products and you're doing good deeds, then your score goes up. But if you do something wrong or bad, or you come against the government anyway, your score goes down. Based on your score, you can purchase things. That means if you have a bad score, you won't be able to purchase things. You'll be limited in your purchasing. You won't be able to travel as much. You won't be able to buy train tickets. You won't be able to get where you want to go or do the things that you want to. And every single transaction is controlled by their currency and an app that they have downloaded, and they scan every time that they make a purchase. Well, each product has a value to it, whether it's a good or bad, and a score assigned to that. And so literally every single purchase you make makes your score go up or down. And if you walk somebody across the street, an elderly person, that's a good deed. Your score goes up because the 200 million cameras are watching you. Plus they have somebody in your neighborhood that's going around recording your good deeds or bad deeds, and then taking that ledger and handing it in to the authorities so that they can actually post every entry that person in your neighborhood has recorded against you or for you. Seems really crazy, but that's China. But is that happening here in America? Well, yes, it is, but it's under a capitalist type cloak, I will say. So here, let me give you some examples of this. In America, we have car insurance. Well, Allstate has this DriveWise program to provide clients. I'm going to read this because I'm pulling this and I've got different corporations that I'm actually going to read that I pulled right from their own websites. So the DriveWise program is to provide clients with a consistent experience. We collect data across any type of device, including speed, smoothness of driving, distraction, and time of day. This allows us to create a score. Think about that. A score, all right, for every journey a driver completes, which we present to them as well as their insurer, an employer, or in the case of a fleet operator. Our scores help insurance companies price their policies and predict risk for each driver. Now, this is all based on, in China, it's all based on, there's a score assigned to each individual person based on their behavior, so risk and behavior, to determine, if they're a risk to society. So each person's given a score based on their behavior, and that determines their risk. So you've got three things here: score, behavior, and risk. Well, in the same way, the insurance company is doing the same thing. They're giving you a score based on your driving behavior to determine, well, they call it to predict risk for each driver more accurately. This is called UBI, or user-based insurance, where many consumers shop for competitive insurance quotes through online programs, but driving history information is not easily transferable from one insurance company to another. So when consumers switch to another insurance company, the insurer must gather this complete data, driving history, all over again. Well, that makes it difficult for pricing. So they're trying to actually create this portable driving risk score that is based on personal driving behavior, and then that data can be easily shared among insurance providers. Now, Facebook has begun to assign its users a reputation score, predicting their trustworthiness on a scale of 0 to 1. A user's trustworthiness score isn't meant to be an absolute indicator of a person's credibility. Rather, the score is one measurement among thousands of new behavioral clues, score again, based on behavioral clues, that Facebook now takes into account as it seeks to understand risk. Again, those three words: score, behavior, and risk. Twitter has an author influencer score. For example, new factors are now factors in the behavior, again, score and behavior, of other accounts in a person's network as a risk factor. And judging whether a person's tweets should be spread, Twitter's author influencer score is only used in Twitter, though the score is a global measure of influence on a scale of 0 to 100, which can be used to compare all Twitter authors. The author's influencer score is the result of a proprietary algorithm that considers many aspects of the author's posting history and performance. Other aspects include the number of followers, frequency of posts, actions that followers take on the author's posts, likes, and retweets, and others. Life insurance. The New York State Department of Financial Services announced earlier this year, which was 2019, that life insurance companies can base premiums on what they find in your social media posts. That Instagram pic showing you teasing a grizzly bear at Yellowstone with a martini in one hand and a bucket of cheese fries in the other, and a cigarette in your mouth could cost you money. On the other hand, a Facebook post showing you doing yoga might actually save you money. Uber and Lyft, you score the driver based on 5 stars, and the driver scores you based on 5 stars. Low scores means you don't get picked up. So if you're a bad passenger and your score is really low, they could overlook you by not picking you up. We know about the FICA credit score. We've been using that for a long time. It's most obviously geared toward loans. Airbnb just filed a patent for a trait analyzer. It's a software that scrapes the internet for your traits. which risk scores, again, now traits as behaviors, but risk scores each reservation before it is confirmed. Apple, information about how you use your device, including the approximate number of phone calls or emails you send and receive, will be used to compute a device trust score, meaning your device is receiving a score. It's called a trust score. This is straight from the iTunes privacy page. Of course, to get all this information and all these scores up to one central location, you need an aggregator. So is there any aggregators out there? Because you can take all these scores, combine them into one pot, divide them by their number, and you can get an overall score based on everything: your driving history, your social media, your device that you use. Your complete score can be aggregated. So yes, there are aggregators already happening. That's companies that pull data from different sources in one database. A company called Patron Scan maintains a list already of objectionable customers that bars and restaurants can use to exclude certain visitors. That's already in play. People who love social media understand the company Hootsuite, where you can literally post one article and Hootsuite will automatically send it up to all your social media accounts, and based on even a schedule. Well, Hootsuite says your social score, interesting that they use those two words that China uses. Your social score is a snapshot of how you're performing on social compared to other businesses. We look at your followers, posting frequency, engagement, clicks, audience activity, and more. We also give you personalized recommendations to help you improve and strengthen your social media presence. Over time, these recommendations get better as we learn more about you, your industry, and your audience. We take into consideration all connected social accounts when we generate your score. We currently measure Instagram business profiles, Facebook pages, LinkedIn pages, and Twitter accounts, and we plan to expand these. Well, mylife.com is an aggregator that pulls in a reputation score for you. And these scores are based on background details, personal reviews, social media posts, and are constantly updated. The reputation profiles can include everything that affects someone's reputation. That could mean criminal and civil court records, lawsuits, liens, judgments, income, property records, social media, work and education history, photos, personal reviews, and complete contact details. Getting a little scary. Okay, so yeah, but none of these are exactly called, the social credit system, though it seems very similar. Well, listen to this. Google filed a patent in 2012. This is what the patent's name is: Method and System for Social Credit Scoring. Interesting. I mean, pretty much identical to what China is using as their name. And this patent was granted in 2015. This is what it says. This application relates generally to internet-based communications and more specifically to methods and systems for evaluating online activity of users and scoring social credit of users. Social credit? A method for calculating a social credit score based on online activity of a user is provided. Online activity may be monitored and processed to calculate an indicator number, right, of user activity and its influence on others to obtain a social credit score of the user. Social credit scores may be a source of information for advertisers, employers, bankers, and other information on social credit scores may be analyzed to determine users with high scores, to distinguish top score users and mark them with special prizes, titles, or symbols. According to Fast Company, the most disturbing aspect of the U.S. social credit system is that these punishments are all levied outside the official justice system. It's an alternative legal system where the accused have fewer rights. the outlet wrote, later adding that if current trends hold, it's possible that in the future, a majority of misdemeanors and even some felonies will be punished not by Washington, D.C., but by Silicon Valley. Well, for total control to happen, governments have to have a digital currency, not a crypto. They're going to regulate and regulate and regulate until crypto's pushed down because they can't track it. Again, we're talking about authoritarian governments coming into play during the last tribulation period, but the infrastructure has got to be built for that. And part of that is to have their own digital coin, each country or currency, where they can actually track this, getting rid of the cashless system because you can't track cash and what things are purchased. But the only way to really do this is through a digital coin, which would be issued through the central bank digital currency, or the CBDC. And so it's already happening. China's already one of the leaders in this. And so that's actually part of what's happening here in America as well. Just this year, on March the 9th, President Biden actually signed in an executive order 14067, and it's called the Ensuring Responsible Development of Digital Assets, or a digital coin. This research and experimentation of the digital dollar, and it was categorized as urgent. So literally, we're actually seeing in America now the rise of a Fed coin, or a digital currency. And what is that going to look like? Well, obviously, that plays into the control, because we, just as China is, they download an app, all their money is put into that, and it's tracked every single purchase. Well, they can't do that with cash, and they can't do that with crypto. So they're going to be pushing those down and out of the way and replace it with their own digital currency. And interesting enough, Google also filed a patent in 2017 that literally says digital currency to be issued by the central bank for mobile and wearable devices. Mobile devices being scanned, a digital currency, and Google's already filed a patent for that in 2017. So, look up who filed these patents. Very interesting. The same three people filed these patents, and this is all public knowledge, and you can just Google it and find out, but it's very interesting. The mark of the beast on the hand or the forehead as a method of controlling, we don't really know what that's going to look like. But right now we do know that in Sweden, there's a Sweden chip. The idea might still be very new in the US, but thousands of people in Sweden have signed up to get this microchip implanted. And it's reported that thousands of people were getting this rice grain size chip that was placed under or just above their thumbs, making it easier for them to scan themselves in, with digital readers. It's also Sweden's largest train company has started allowing commuters to use the chips instead of tickets. And there's talk that the chips could be used to make payments in shops and restaurants. So all of this is taking place. Technology is moving at a speed where things are happening. But what really ushers in government control? Crisis. We've seen that with the COVID pandemic. When that happened, governments took control. People are willing to give up their freedoms for security. And so if people are in a panic or they're in a crisis, they're relying on the government to take care of them. And so they give up their freedoms in exchange for the government taking control of that. Well, it's interesting that during world crisis, whether it's food, economy, energy, health, transportation, supply chain, or famine, it literally can lead into governments taking over control and people being willing to give up their freedoms for that. Genesis 47 shows a story here. I'm just going to read this. This will be we'll finish up here with this story. But it's Joseph and Pharaoh when a famine, a world crisis, takes place in their land. So Genesis 47, verses 13, I'll bring this up here on the screen. verses 13 and 14. Now there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they brought, or the grain which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. So let's start off with this. The money is failing. I mean, we're talking about the end of days. We're talking about the world system, how all this is going to play out. Eventually, that the earth will be destroyed with fire and extreme heat. But before that, we're talking about this world system that's taken place. And so here in the first verses of verse 13 and 14, Joseph gathered up all the money and brought it to Pharaoh. So now the money is now controlled by the government. That's the first thing that must take place, is the money has to be controlled. And so we're seeing that right there. Now, the next thing here is verse 15. And so when the money failed in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed." Joseph then said, "Well, give us your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock if the money's gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the cattle of the herds, and for donkeys. Thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock. So in verses 15 and 17, we're seeing that the people exchanged their livestock, which was actually their means of income. This is what they sold, the livestock, to produce income for themselves. So now their money's gone, and now their livestock is gone, and it's all been given to Pharaoh. The government now controls their money and controls their means of making money. So the people traded all of that for perishable bread, and they brought the livestock to the government. Now, verse 18 says, when that year ended, they came in the next year and said, "We will not hide from you that our money's gone and you have our herds of livestock. There is nothing left in the sight of my Lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants of Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate." Then Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for every man of the Egyptians sold his field because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh's. So now in verse 20, Joseph buys all the personal land. So the money's gone, the livestock's gone, the means of income is gone. Now he buys the land, which includes, think about this, their property or their housing is on their land. So they sold their land now, and Joseph literally brought it to Pharaoh, meaning Pharaoh or the government now owns all the land, and the land was a means to produce food for their family. So of course, when someone buys the land, they also own the house that's on it. And this is where verse 21 comes in, and it says, And as for the people, he moved them into the cities from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other end. Okay, so obviously they don't have housing anymore. So then Pharaoh's like, well, what do we do with these people? Well, let's move them into the cities, government housing, right? From one end of the border of Egypt to the other, they moved them all into the city. So Joseph takes over the housing market and moves the people into government-controlled housing in the cities. And so then the last thing here is verse 23 through 25. And it says, Joseph said to the people, "Indeed, I have bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh," for the government. "Look, here is seed for you. You shall go and sow the land, and it shall come to pass in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh. 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the field of your food, and for those of your household, and for food for your little ones." So they said, "You have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants." Did you get that? The government has taken over their money, their livestock, their land, their housing, and now the government's purchased them. They are now servants to Pharaoh. So Joseph buys the people as servants to work the government land. So he took their cash, took their means of producing income, took their means of producing food, took their homes, gave them government housing in the cities, and made them all servants. And listen to what they said. The people own nothing and are all economically equal, and rejoice that Pharaoh had saved their lives in verse 25. Now, just quickly right here, the World Economic Forum has an initiative in 2030, and literally there's an article out that says, "Welcome to 2030, I own nothing, I have no privacy, and life has never been better." Sounds very ominous to Genesis 47 when the people said, "Look, we don't have anything, we don't own anything, and we're thanking Pharaoh for saving our lives." Well, this was literally written, this article, in 2016 on November the 10th by Ada Auken, which is a member of the Parliament in Denmark. She's a World Economic Forum contributor. And here's the first paragraph. It says, "Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city," or should I say, our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city. Everything you considered a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, and all the things we need in our daily lives. One by one, all these things became free. So it ended up not making any sense for us to own anything. And that article you can find on the World Economic Forum and at Forbes.com as well. So what about the Christians? I mean, are we going to have to deal with this authoritarian government? Well, I think that we're going to be raptured out prior to that. But if not, I do see in Scripture, and even in Genesis 47, where there is protection. Notice in verse 27, I'll just read this to you, but it says, "So Israel," now this is during the time of the famine, time of Joseph, and Israel was dwelling in the land of Goshen, which was part of Egypt, and they were part of the famine as well. But here's an interesting thing. Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions. Now, none of the other Egyptians had possessions. They had to sell everything. The government owns everything from the Egyptians, but not the Israelites. So they had possessions there, and they grew, and they multiplied exceedingly. Man, sounds like a wonderful protection through a very harsh time. And I believe that us Christians will be protected through a harsh time of the tribulation, whether it's through the rapture being taken out or whether it's mid-trib taken out before the great tribulation, which is the last 3.5 years. But God is protecting his people. He's sealing us. And I just believe that we can have comfort and get comfort from that. And so anyway, I don't have any discussion questions for this because I think that there was a lot of information in this that, well, I think would actually stir a lot of discussion for you. So I don't want to, steer you with discussion questions in this. Just whatever you feel in your group to discuss, I think it would be awesome to do that. So anyway, I hope this has been enlightening to help you understand that there is an infrastructure being built for the end time authoritarian government, and we're already seeing it play out here in America as well. So I hope you have a great discussion today, and we'll see you in the next video. God bless.